Mistakes are how we learn as people. However, we don't always have to be the person who makes the mistake to necessarily learn from it. So, I'm going to show you exactly all of the mistakes that a lot of other sellers have made and how to avoid them when you're looking at your Amazon advertising. These are some of the most common mistakes, and some of them not so common at the end of the day, but things you still need to be looking out for to make sure you're following best practice and you don't run into the same errors and mistakes and headaches that everyone else has before you. So, getting us started right off the bat here, we can first see our campaign window here. So, one of the biggest mistakes that I see people making when they are looking at creating Amazon advertising campaigns is not diversifying enough. Number one, as always, is just not diversifying. So what that means essentially is, as you can see here, we have several different types of campaigns. So we have a phrase campaign here, we have a broad campaign here, we also have competitive campaigns, we have auto campaigns, we have a bunch of different types of campaigns across the board, self campaigns, and the point of all of these different campaigns is to have a different effect. So you don't want to stick too closely to just having one or two types of campaigns, just sticking with a broad campaign or just sticking with an exact campaign. You want to make sure that you are targeting across the board with broad, phrase, exact, everything in between when you're looking at your campaigns. This is because just because you have a keyword in one campaign that's a broad campaign or a phrase campaign doesn't mean that necessarily it's going to work across the board for every type of scenario. So always make sure that you have different types of campaigns set up on your account, because each one of them is going to perform in a different manner, and that's why they have the different types. Now, what is number two? Number two is actually a fairly simple one, and that is negative targeting. One of the number one things that I see when we have new clients, when anybody else is coming in, when I'm looking at other people's selling accounts, that they do not do enough negative targeting. I will always say a good rule of thumb for negative targeting is that if you are new, you should have a 1-to-1 ratio for your targeting versus your negative targeting keywords. And then if you are trying to grow, you should have a 2-to-1 ratio of targeting to negative targeting. And then once you are in a stage of long term, you have been around for a while now, and you are just trying to make sure you maintain, you should have roughly a 1-to-2 ratio for negative targeting, if not a 1-to-3 ratio. So negative targeting, for those that don't do it currently and don't understand it, is essentially taking certain keywords and terms that you are trying to not have show up for that specific ad and adding them in against that ad. So even if this is a campaign where we are targeting something that says white sage, we will not have 5 pounds white sage show up as a actual term. So negative targeting, it is definitely something that people do not do enough of and are afraid to target something that's good, target something that's bad. But negative targeting is absolutely something you should be doing. If you have a bad keyword, do not be afraid to throw it into negative targeting. A bad keyword is one that is just not performing. It's eating up your ad budget. It is causing you way too high of A costs. Anything in between, you should definitely look at adding some negative keywords and negative targeting. Now, number 3, past that as well, we're going to go on to our actual targeting. Now, when I am talking about actual targeting, I'm talking about not specifically the match type or anything. I want to talk about the number of targets within any type of ad group or campaign. Now, my rule of thumb for any type of targeting, any type of campaign, is always going to be 5 to 10. Now, the only exception to this is a gold panning campaign, but outside of that, 5 to 10 targets max within a campaign. This is for a few reasons. One, you want to be able to effectively monitor what a campaign is doing. So if it's against keywords, this one's against products, for instance, you have to be able to effectively monitor it, right? And the more targets you have, the less effective that's going to be. 2, you are going to find situations where certain keywords or products or terms, anything in a campaign, are going to overwhelmingly dominate in that campaign. It is going to be much more effective for you to have between 5 and 10 when something like that happens than it is going to be if you have 50 different ones in there. So you can see, for instance, even here, we have this one product at the top here that has 11,000 impressions compared to the next highest at 480. So even for one with only 5 targets, we can very easily see which one of these 5 targets is taking up the majority of our overall impressions and clicks. So that's kind of the reason you want to stick between 5 and 10. It's going to be easiest for you to manage. It's going to make it so that even in the scenario in which you have something that dominates, it's not going to necessarily take away everything from the budget or eat up the entire budget. And you can really more effectively narrow down your search, and as well, going back to our negative targeting, much more easily have that ratio of 1 to 2 for long-term negative targeting. Now, past this as well, this is the other crime and mistake that I see within Amazon, and that would be doubling up your campaigns, ad groups, and targeting. A big thing that I see, and we can just click into any of these right here, such as this one, is that people will have a few different things when they are creating a campaign. They will end up going into a campaign and they will go ahead and add a bunch of different match types. So you can see we have broad here and broad here. A big thing that I will advise anyone and everyone against is to keep campaigns and ad groups to a single match type at any given time. The reason for this is that it may seem good to have your match type to be, all together in one, and especially since I was talking about one of the major mistakes, people not doing enough types of campaigns and match types. But a big thing that you also want to make sure of when you are setting up all your campaigns is that you can very easily understand, one, what a campaign is doing from a naming convention standpoint, and two, how you're actually targeting in that campaign. If you have broad, phrase, and exact all mashed together into one giant campaign, you're going to have a really hard time, one, figuring out where everything actually is, what is actually performing. Is the campaign performing because the specific keywords, or is it because certain match types? You won't know. Again, you can have the exact same campaign 3 different times with an exact, a phrase, and a broad with the exact same keywords, and all 3 of those campaigns are going to do different things. They're going to have different metrics for them because match types are so different in how they actually push out to the end consumer. So that is another major mistake that I would look at avoiding, just from the aspect of it's going to really mess up your data. It's going to make it a lot more difficult for you to optimize long term for the product and for the actual campaign as a whole. Now, finally, one of the biggest mistakes that I see people making overall when it comes to actually advertising on Amazon would be not setting firm boundaries. And what do I mean by that? Well, I mean something very specifically. If you are looking on your campaign mixer here, you can see a lot of different campaigns, and you can even come up here and you can see we have a certain ACoS level, a certain sales level, spend level. A big thing that I see people doing is that they take ACoS, they take how much they're spending, and they are limiting themselves. Now, what do I mean by limiting yourself? Well, something very simply. If we come over here to these, we see this. We see our budget. Many people are going to look at their ACoS and they're going to look at their spend up here, and they are then going to go directly to their budget, and they are going to start limiting themselves across the board on their budget for their daily budget at a campaign level. I would not suggest that anyone ever actually limit themselves from a campaign daily budget standpoint, and instead limit yourself from a bid standpoint. If we just, again, hop into any of these, you can see we have specific bids. We also have rules active on all these bids. Campaign budgets are great to have a firm, this is as much as I can possibly spend. The point of a campaign budget is not to necessarily limit how much you are spending, but more so make sure that a campaign doesn't go out of, go crazy and spend way, way too much money. Bid is going to be a much, much better place for anyone to actually limit what their campaign is doing. And what I mean by that is that if you have, for instance, a up and down bid campaign and you are afraid of spending way too much money on it, you can set a low budget, but don't set it so low that if it is going crazy, you don't readjust it for some reason. A campaign is not necessarily always bad just because it has a high A cost at first when you first start running it. So give a campaign the legs it deserves with a good budget allowance and just monitor via the actual bid. You can always change the bid. Yes, you can always change the budget, but you can never make a campaign that has been shut off for a period of time turn back on without making any of those changes. So definitely limit yourself from a bid perspective, not a budget perspective. Past this, some very basic things you should always remember is that your advertising is not just a testament of what you are spending on it. It is a testament of your conversion. Your conversion is a testament to your overall product, your listing, and everything in it. If you do not have a good product listing, even if you have the best price in the world or the best product in the world, people are not going to click on your advertisement and you are just going to be wasting a lot of money. So always make sure alongside a good advertising campaign, you have a really, really well-placed product with good design and good pricing as well.